I'm Dorothy Parker. And tonight, on my 52nd birthday, the only thing louder than the ticking of the clock in my quiet Manhattan apartment is the echo of my own footsteps as I walk through the door. The city glows beyond the glass. Neon reflections on rain-slicked streets below. But inside, my living room feels like the waiting room of someone else's life. I set my briefcase down and slip off the heels I've worn since dawn. My feet throb. But the ache is a familiar one. 14 hours at my ad agency. Closing a deal worth more than most people's annual salary. And yet, like every year, nobody calls. Not my father. Not my mother. And certainly not my little brother Ben. I laugh to myself. That dry, brittle kind of laugh. That's meant to sound brave, but just comes out tired. Birthdays are for children. I tell myself out loud, echoing my mother's old refrain from my childhood. But there's a cake sitting on my kitchen table, a small, store-bought one. White frosting with blue piping and a single pink candle. Waiting to be lit. Waiting for someone to sing. I check my phone again. 0 new messages. I scroll. Hoping. Half hoping. Maybe a voicemail, maybe a forgotten card. But the only notification I see is a reminder from my bank. Deposit received $8. 200 bonus. It should be a reason to celebrate. But the silence from the people who made me feels heavier than any money could fix. The apartment is filled with all the careful touches I've spent years collecting: framed photos of the city in winter. Shelves lined with dog-eared novels. A throw blanket. My late aunt crocheted before she passed. But nothing in here fills the hollow space where my family should be. So, I do what I always do. Light the candle myself. Sit on the edge of the couch. And whisper, "Happy birthday, Dorothy." My own voice sounds strange in the stillness. I almost blow out the candle. But stop, what's the point of wishing for something that never comes? And then, just as I'm about to give up and go to bed, my phone buzzes. At first, I think maybe, just maybe this year will be different. My hands tremble as I reach for it. But it's only a photo notification from my cousin Megan. I open it. And that's when my stomach twists. The image fills the screen: my brother Ben. Younger than me by 6 years, but the family golden boy. Stands in the center of a crowd. Champagne glass raised. Face flushed with pride. Around him, my entire family: mom, dad, cousins I haven't seen in decades. Even our childhood neighbor Mr. Sheridan, all gathered under a bright, glittering banner that reads, "Congratulations Ben, promotion to senior VP." There are balloons, catered platters, and laughter. You can practically hear through the photo. Someone's holding up a sparkler. My mother beams at Ben, hand on his shoulder. My father, red-cheeked from whiskey, has a look on his face I can barely remember ever being directed at me: pure, unfiltered pride. The timestamp on the photo: 8:04 p.m. Tonight. My birthday. It takes me a moment to process. I scroll down. There are more photos. Ben opening gifts. My mother hugging him. A chocolate cake bigger than the one I bought myself. Covered in candles and sparklers. Dozens of comments. "So proud of you." Ben, the Parker legacy continues. What a night. Not a single mention of me. Not a single happy birthday, Dorothy. It's not that they forgot. It's that they remembered and chose him. Again. I close my eyes, pressing the phone to my forehead, feeling the tears threaten behind my eyelids. I'm not a child anymore. I tell myself. I'm a successful woman in the greatest city in the world. But inside, I am suddenly 11 again. Waiting at a restaurant table with a melting candle on my cake, while everyone else cheers for Ben's first baseball trophy. This is the moment something in me snaps. Quietly but completely. For years, I've swallowed this pain, telling myself it doesn't matter. But tonight, as the candle flickers on my untouched cake, I realize it matters more than anything. And to everyone watching right now, let me pause a moment. Comment where you're watching from, what time it is, and whether you've ever felt betrayed by family. Hit like so more people hear this story. You wouldn't believe how many of us out there are silently celebrating alone. As midnight nears, I stare at my reflection in the darkened window, just me, my cake, and the city that never sleeps. I promise myself this year, something will change. They may have forgotten me, but I won't let them erase me. Not anymore. Because what happens next, even I couldn't have predicted. If you want to know how someone ends up alone on her 52nd birthday, talking to a cake, you have to start much earlier before the career, the city lights, and the mask of self-sufficiency. You have to go back to the Parker house on East 64th Street. A brownstone with flowers out front and secrets behind every curtain. I was the firstborn Dorothy Ann Parker, named after my father's favorite poet and my grandmother. My arrival was, I'm told, a cause for celebration. For about 3 years, I was Daddy's little girl. There are faded Polaroids of me on his shoulders in Central Park. My mother pushing a stroller, both of them grinning wide. But all that changed when Ben was born. Suddenly, there was a son, the heir. As my father would sometimes joke at dinner parties, glass of bourbon in hand. Finally, a Parker boy. Now we can really carry on the name, he'd say. As if I'd failed at something I never even tried for. It wasn't outright cruelty at first, just small things. Ben got the bigger bedroom, the new bike, the louder applause at school events. My mother would smooth my hair and whisper, "Don't be jealous, Dorothy. Boys just need a little more encouragement." My father explained it this way, "You're smart and independent. Ben needs more help. You'll be fine. You always are." I clung to those words for decades, wearing them like armor, though they never truly fit. By 8, I'd learned to be the helper, the one who set the table, who comforted Ben when he failed a test, who shared my allowance to buy him baseball cards. Whenever something went wrong, a lost toy, a scraped knee, my mother would say, "Dorothy, let your brother have his way. You're the big sister. Show some grace." Sometimes I'd look at Ben, all grins and sticky fingers, and wonder if he knew what it felt like to be invisible. When I turned 12, I begged for a piano recital, practicing Chopin until my fingers ached. My teacher said I had promise. The night of the show, the seats I'd saved for my parents were empty. My mother sent a note with our neighbor Ben's Little League finals ran late. "Play your heart out, honey." I played for strangers and Mrs. Geller, our neighbor, who clapped the loudest and wiped a tear when I bowed. Ben came home later, clutching a trophy nearly as tall as he was. "Sorry. You know how it is," he said. And I nodded. Because I did. At 16, I watched my Sweet 16 plans dissolve when Ben qualified for a state chess tournament. "We'll celebrate next weekend," Dad said. But next weekend never came. These little eraseros, they add up. They teach you not to ask, Not to expect. But every time I saw Ben beamed at, celebrated for something ordinary, it stung like a paper cut small, but relentless. College should have been my escape. I got into Barnard on scholarship. But at the dinner where I shared the news, my father barely looked up from his steak. That's nice, Dorothy. Ben got into St. John's, too. Isn't that wonderful? That night, I wept into my pillow, the city lights outside my dorm window twinkling like distant hope. Still, I built a life for myself. I made friends, real ones. Like Annie from Boston and old Mrs. Geller, who by then had moved 2 blocks away but sent me Christmas cards every year. I learned to survive disappointment, to count on myself, to measure success in my own quiet ways. But the family patterns never changed. My first big work promotion, my mother didn't even mention it. Instead, she forwarded me Ben's engagement announcement. Isn't Jessica lovely? We're so proud. The word proud was never attached to my name. Not once. Not even after I bought my first apartment or saved for my own retirement. One memory still stands out: my college graduation. I graduated cum laude. First Parker to ever do so. At the celebration dinner, Ben stood up halfway through, cleared his throat, and announced his fiancée was pregnant. The table exploded in joy, champagne corks, hugs, the works. My graduation became Ben's baby night before the dessert even hit the table. Through all of it, I kept up appearances, sent Christmas cards, remembered every birthday, even when mine was skipped, and showed up for every family emergency. They called me dependable. They called me strong. But inside, the ache grew. Not just for what I'd lost, but for what I never had: a family who saw me, celebrated me, who remembered my cake as much as my brother's. Sometimes I'd tell myself it didn't matter, that I was above it. Stronger for hang survival. But there's a kind of loneliness that seeps into your bones when you're the forgotten child, the one who listens, who gives, who is always the second choice. You might wonder why someone like me, a grown woman with a high-powered job and friends who adore her, still acts over childhood slights. But when your own family erases you, it's not something you just outgrow. It shapes you, defines you, whispers in your ear, even as you succeed. You don't really matter. Not here. But all those years of being overlooked, they taught me something my family never expected. They taught me how to disappear and how to come back, stronger than ever. Because if you think this story is just about hurt feelings and forgotten birthdays, you're not even close to ready for what's coming next. You might imagine that, as adults, families outgrow childhood favoritism, that the passing of time, the building of careers, the marriages and divorces, would soften those old patterns. You'd be wrong. In some families, it only grows sharper with age. Last year, Thanksgiving. It's supposed to be the time of gratitude, of gathering, of putting aside differences for one meal. I went all out. It was the first time I'd ever hosted a test of my independence, my success. I'd spent days planning, cooking recipes from my grandmother's old notebook, picking out table linens that matched the autumn leaves outside my window. I even booked a jazz trio to surprise my dad, who always talked about the good old music of the 1962nd. I called each family member, confirming times, double-checking dietary needs. My fridge was filled with pies and salads, every room gleaming. The morning of Thanksgiving, I woke early, full of hope. I texted my mom. Can't wait to see you all. Dinner's at 4. No response. Noon came and went. The turkey was already in the oven. At 2. My phone buzzed. First, a message from Dad. Sorry, honey. Ben's big pitch got moved to tonight. Family's heading downtown to support him. We'll do Thanksgiving at his place next week. I remember standing there, spatula in hand, looking at the text for a full minute before the meaning landed. My eyes darted to the carefully set table, 12 place settings. Candles ready to be lit. The jazz trio was already on their way. My heart thudded so hard I could hear it echo in the empty kitchen. One by one, texts trickled in. So sorry. You know how important Ben's presentation is. He needs all of us there for luck. No one offered to stop by for dessert. No one asked about my plans. I canceled the jazz trio and ate a plate of cold turkey by myself. The city silent outside. The candles burning low. The next morning, Mom called. Did you have a nice holiday? Dear, did you see Ben's news on television? The whole family was there. It was such a proud moment. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask if she remembered whose kitchen she'd never seen, whose piece she'd never tasted. But I just said, yes. I saw and listened as she went on about Ben's applause and how his boss shook his hand. The truth is, I'd grown used to being skipped over for family events. But this missing Thanksgiving at my own table for the sake of my brother's career, that was a new kind of cut. It was around that time that something inside me hardened. For years, I'd tried to earn their love showing up, remembering their dates, sending gifts and cards. But as I wiped down the table that night, scraping the untouched cranberry sauce into the trash, I realized they never once put me first. Not when it counted. Christmas rolled around. I sent gifts: monogrammed handkerchiefs for Dad, a silk scarf for Mom, a rare first edition of Hemingway for Ben. On my birthday in January, my parents called, not to wish me a happy birthday, but to see if I'd help plan Ben's dog's gotcha day party. You're so organized, Dorothy. And Ben's so busy. Can you handle the cake and decorations? That party, mind you, had 3 cakes, a clown, and a full guest list of family friends I hadn't seen since childhood. At one point, someone asked, whose birthday is next? Mom laughed. Oh, Dorothy's is next week. But we'll be busy with Ben's business trip. I stood at the edge of the room, holding a balloon, feeling invisible. My father toasted Ben to the future of the Parker family as if there was no one else in the room. Ben just grinned, basking in the applause, not even glancing my way. At work, things weren't much better. My promotion last year, the one I'd poured my life into, was dismissed at dinner as cute. Advertising isn't real impact, Dorothy, my father said, not looking up from his plate. Ben's in finance. Now that's a legacy. I tried God. I tried to pretend it didn't hurt, to let it slide, to remind myself that I was strong, that I had built a life without their approval. But that ache, the one that started as a child, had become a constant companion. It whispered, you're not enough. You never will be. And so, as I sat in my empty apartment on my birthday, staring at the family photos from Ben's party on my day, in my absence, it finally became clear they hadn't forgotten me. They had chosen, year after year, to celebrate someone else. They had made a tradition out of erasing me. one party at a time. But what they didn't know was I'd learned something from all those years on the sidelines. I'd learned how to watch, how to wait, and how to gather every detail for the moment. I'd finally stand up and change the story. Because the day was coming when the forgotten sister would not just be remembered, she'd be impossible to ignore. The night of my 52nd birthday marked a quiet revolution in my soul. I sat in the dim light of my living room. Half a glass of wine forgotten on the coffee table. That little cake, one slice missing, growing stale by the hour. There was a strange clarity in my sadness. A sense that I was standing at the edge of something new. If love from family wasn't coming, I would stop begging for scraps. But I wouldn't walk away quietly. Not anymore. The next morning, instead of calling my mother to ask again, "Did you forget my birthday?" I called Mrs. Geller. Yes. The same neighbor who cheered at my childhood recitals. The one who always saw me. By now, she was a respected estate lawyer. Still sharp as ever at 74. I hadn't spoken to her in months. But she answered on the second ring. "Dorothy. Darling, what a surprise. Is everything all right?" I hesitated. My voice cracked a little. But I managed. "I need some advice. The kind only you can give." She didn't ask questions. Just said, "Come for tea. I'll put on a fresh pot. And Dorothy, bring your courage." Sitting across from Mrs. Geller at her kitchen table, sunlight pouring in, her ancient cat purring at my feet, I finally told the story I'd kept locked inside for decades. The pattern of exclusion. The holidays spent alone. The parties for Ben on my birthday. I thought she'd look at me with pity. But instead, she grew fierce. "My dear, you've done all the right things by everyone but yourself. You've given them every chance to love you. And they've thrown it away. Why not put yourself first? For once, why not use what you know about your family, about their weaknesses, to finally take control?" I blinked, surprised at the boldness of her words. "But what can I do? They're my family. They'd never listen." She smiled. The way only someone who's survived life's hardest lessons can. People who build their legacy on erasing others always leave a trail. You just need to follow it. And you, Dorothy, are better at watching than any of them realize. That night, something changed in me. I started keeping notes. Every slight, every forgotten birthday, every text asking for help but never offering thanks. I began to see a pattern, one that ran deeper than simple neglect. Mrs. Geller introduced me to her godson, Tommy, a retired private investigator who now volunteered for a legal aid group. He was charming, with a sly smile and a habit of noticing things other people missed. Over coffee at a little cafe near Washington Square Park, he asked, "Do you really want to know what they've been up to all these years?" "I do," I said. And I meant it. With his help, I started collecting information. It started with public records. Old scholarships Ben won, turns out. Some of his achievements had come from my mother's quiet phone calls to the right school board members. Promotions at work. There were some recommendations from my father's legal connections, smoothing the way. But there was more. Tommy found documents showing that the ancestral Parker home in Brooklyn, the brownstone that was always called the family legacy, was not, in fact, owned by my father. It had quietly passed into my late godmother's hands years ago. And when she died just 2 months earlier, she left everything too. I remembered the letter, still unopened, in my desk. I'd thought it was just condolences. But when I finally read it, my breath caught. My darling Dorothy, I always saw how you were treated. I hope this home gives you the security and respect you were denied. It is yours now. By my will. Use it as you see fit. With love. Aunt Edith. Suddenly, everything shifted. For the first time, I had something my family wanted. Something they'd taken for granted would be Ben's. Someday. Mrs. Geller, ever the tactician, drew up papers confirming my ownership. Tommy helped me quietly transfer utilities, manage the property, and ensure every legal detail was airtight. And all the while, I kept up the same polite front with my family. When Mom called to ask for help organizing Ben's engagement party, I smiled and said, "Of course." When Dad texted about family matters, I replied promptly but never revealed what I knew. But inside, the old Dorothy was gone. In her place stood someone quietly, ruthlessly determined. I started saying no to things I didn't want to do. I stopped sending money for family emergencies that always seemed to end up as down payments for Ben's new cars or Dad's golf trips. I invested my own bonuses, took weekends for myself, and began reconnecting with people who truly cared. Mrs. Geller, Annie from Boston, even Tommy, who became both ally and confidant. My parents didn't notice. At first, they were too busy planning Ben's next big celebration. But my silence began to matter. My absence at family events was suddenly selfish. My refusal to help ungrateful. Ben called once, late at night. "Come on, Dorothy. Don't make this difficult. You know how much this house means to the family. Dad's counting on it for retirement. It's not like you even care about it." His words stung, but there was something almost comical in his arrogance. For the first time, I realized the people who made me feel invisible were terrified of losing the things they took for granted. None of them noticed that I'd stopped calling. None of them cared until they needed something from me. And the moment was coming soon when they would need me more than ever. Because sometimes, the best revenge is just letting people experience the emptiness they forced you to live with for years. A month passed. The city thawed from winter's chill. And as spring settled over Manhattan, so did a new sense of calm inside me. My family's texts became more frequent, more urgent. My mother's voice, once casual and clipped, now oozed a sticky sweetness I'd never heard before. "Dorothy, darling, I was thinking, would you help plan Ben and Jessica's engagement party? You've always been so good at details. And now with your bonus, you could really make it special. You know how much it means to the whole family." I almost laughed out loud. The whole family. Translation: the only time you matter is when we want something from you. I played along. "Of course. Mom. Just send me the date and the guest list." That week, I received a formal invitation to a family meeting in Edward's tradition whenever money or real estate was involved. This time, the subject line was Ben's future and the Brooklyn house. My heart thumped. But not from fear. I wore my best navy suit, the one Aunt Edith always said made me look every inch the air. I walked into my father's office, where everyone was already gathered. Dad at the head of the table, Ben by his side, Mom clutching her pearls, Jessica playing nervously with her engagement ring. Cousins and uncles sat along the walls, all curious eyes on me. Dad cleared his throat, shifting his weight with the practiced authority of a man who'd spent his life in courtrooms. "Dorothy, we've been discussing the transfer of the Brooklyn property. As you know, it's tradition that the eldest son Ben in this case, becomes the legal owner. It's only right for the family legacy. I took a breath, feeling Mrs. Geller's voice echoing in my memory. You have more power than you think. Calmly, I pulled out a folder from my bag and set it on the table. Actually, Dad, that's not the case. Aunt Edith left the house to me. I've already taken care of the transfer. The deed is in my name. A stunned silence fell. For the first time in years, every eye was on me, not with indifference, but with disbelief. Ben's face twisted into a sneer. Don't be ridiculous. Dorothy. You never cared about the family home. You can't handle responsibility like this. Be serious. Mom's lips curled. Darling. Let's be practical. You're always so sensitive. Let your brother have the house. You don't even have a family of your own. Dad's face darkened. A thundercloud building. This isn't about paperwork. Dorothy. The Edwards men have always run that property. Don't start drama just because you feel left out. The words stung. But I was ready. It's not drama, Dad. It's the law. And for the first time, the law's on my side. I watched as the arrogance drained from Ben's expression, replaced by panic. He turned to Jessica, who looked like she wanted to vanish. My mother's hands shook as she set her teacup down a little too hard. But that wasn't all. I took out a second envelope and slid it across the table. And there's more. I've documented every favor that's been done for Ben over the years: scholarship recommendations, job promotions, even that little incident with the falsified internship paperwork for his first job. It's all here. And let's just say, the companies involved would be very interested to see it. Dad's voice wavered, but he tried to regain control. This is blackmail. Dorothy. That's beneath you. I smiled. A small, quiet smile that felt like the first sunrise after a long night. No. Dad. This is self-defense. For years, you all wrote me out of the story. Erased me from the photos, the celebrations, the family tree. Not anymore. Ben exploded. So what's your plan? Hold the house hostage until we grovel. You're pathetic. Dorothy. Always jealous. Always the victim. No wonder you're alone. No man. No kids. Nothing to show but bitterness. His words cut. But I was unbreakable now. I looked him straight in the eye. Actually, Ben, I have a new family, the one I chose. Friends. Mentors. People who respect me. As for the house, I'll decide its future. Maybe I'll sell it to a developer. Maybe I'll turn it into a shelter for women who've been erased by their families. Maybe I'll just keep it as a reminder that the past doesn't get to define me. A gasp rippled through the room. The power shifted suddenly. For the first time, they realized they needed me. And right at that moment, Tommy, my investigator friend, walked in holding a flash drive. You forgot your copies, Dorothy, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I took it from him, cool and calm. Thanks, Tommy. Always good to keep backups. My father's face turned pale. My mother's eyes darted nervously. Ben tried to laugh it off, but there was a tremor in his voice. That was the moment I saw the fear in their eyes, the fear of being forgotten. Left out. Powerless. The fear that had haunted me for a lifetime was now theirs to hold. And right then, I realized the family meeting wasn't about Ben's future or my inheritance. It was about finally forcing them to see the truth they'd tried to bury for years. And I was the one holding the shovel, because just then I uncovered something else that would shock them all. After that family meeting, the air around me changed in ways I never expected. For the first time in my adult life, I felt light, not triumphant, not gloating, just free. The old heaviness that had pressed on my heart for decades began to lift, bit by bit. With every step I took away from their expectations and toward my own truth. Word traveled fast through the family grapevine. Suddenly, everyone wanted a private conversation. My mother called 3 times in one morning, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. "Dorothy, let's talk this out. Please. This isn't like you." My father sent a formal letter, all legalese and veiled threats, warning me not to damage the Edwards' reputation. Ben's text swung from snide to pleading within the same hour. "You're making a mistake. Dorothy, you think this will make you happy. It won't. Family is all you have." But I didn't answer, not with anger, not with explanations. I'd given them enough of my voice already. Instead, I took long walks through the old Brooklyn neighborhood, passing the brownstone that now belonged to me. I ran my hands along the iron railings, remembering Aunt Edith's quiet strength. I let myself imagine what the house could become, maybe a haven for women starting over, or maybe just a peaceful place for myself, filled with laughter and music and second chances. I started spending more time with the people who truly saw me. Mrs. Geller, ever the mentor, began inviting me to Sunday suppers, introducing me to her book club, a group of sharp, funny women in their 70s who told me, "Dorothy, you're one of us now. Welcome to the club." Annie from Boston came to visit for a long weekend. We walked Central Park, sipped hot coffee, talked about dreams we'd forgotten we had. Tommy, the private investigator, became a friend I could call on for advice or just to share a silly story from work. And the work. Oh, it began to bloom. Freed from the need to prove anything to anyone, I found myself more creative, more daring at the agency. My boss noticed. Clients noticed. One day, I won a national campaign for a nonprofit dedicated to supporting overlooked women. The CEO hugged me, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "Thank you for giving us a voice." For once, I felt truly, deeply proud of myself, not for being the responsible daughter, not for making the family look good, but for living by my own values. As the months passed, my family's anger gave way to something like respect or maybe just resignation. They realized that the era of taking me for granted was over. At Ben's wedding, I declined to attend. I sent a simple note, wishing you happiness. Please understand, I am building a new tradition for myself. My mother's eyes, when she saw me weeks later at a distant cousin's funeral, were sadder, softer. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "We didn't know how much you were hurting." I met her gaze and replied, "You never tried to know, Mom. That's what hurt the most." She nodded, finally silent. For anyone who's ever been the invisible one, let me tell you, there is life beyond the ache. There is love. There is hope. And there is a family waiting to be found, even if you build it yourself from scratch. The biggest lesson: sometimes you don't get the apology you deserve. Sometimes the people who hurt you will never admit what they did, but you can still choose to forgive for your own sake, not theirs. You can still choose to write your own ending. You can choose to be seen, even if it's only by the person in the mirror. If you've ever been the afterthought, the reliable one, the safe pair of hands everyone expects to show up, but never truly celebrates, know this: you matter. You deserve joy, not just duty. You deserve to walk into a room and be seen for all that you are. On the 1-year anniversary of that birthday, I stood in my Brooklyn brownstone, surrounded by friends, old and new. There was music and laughter, a cake with my name on it, and candles to light. I closed my eyes, made a wish not for family approval, but for the strength to keep choosing myself. And this time, when I opened my eyes, the room was filled with love I had built from the ground up. If you've ever witnessed or experienced a story of family injustice, I want to hear from you. Share in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the real stories that families wish you'd never hear. Because sometimes, the only way to heal is to tell the truth and let the world see you. At last,